But now I am extremely, extremely excited for our special guest and our keynote speaker now who will guide us through our final session for the day. Rosi Greenberg is an artist of leadership development and the founder of Drawn to Lead, through which she has empowered thousands of leaders to unleash their narrative and find their inner power. She partners with organizations in the recovery advocacy movement to enable leaders at all levels to combat stigma, share stories of impact, and call communities to action to save lives. Through Rosie's workshop, Loving Accountability as a Key Leadership Practice, she will help us rethink how we approach leadership. So often, society makes us believe that we can either be loving or caring, or we can hold people accountable and have clear boundaries. Rosi will help us think through the balance needed so that we can hold both and lead with love. Without further ado, Rosi Greenberg.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. This is a room filled with so much love right now. It's beautiful. Before we get started, I want to just share a little story. Maybe the first time I encountered love and accountability kind of hitting each other. My kindergarten teacher loved rules. And one of her rules was that we had to eat lunch in a very particular fashion. It was half your sandwich, then half your juice, then your snack, then the other half of the sandwich, and the other half of the juice. And to ensure that we 5-year-olds were compliant with this policy, she would walk around the room during lunch, staring at us, making sure that it was just half our sandwich, making sure that there was juice. Terrifying. But my mother, who is incredibly creative, couldn't take me out of that kindergarten class, but she could help me see that the rules were a little much. So one day, I'm sitting there, cowering under the accountability and boundaries and firmness of my teacher, and I get my sandwich, ready to eat half of my sandwich, and I take a bite, and there's a chocolate bunny inside. That my mother made the sandwich into the dessert to offer a little bit of care and a little bit of love and a little bit of creativity to this heinous lunch practice. And I think that is one of my first memories of realizing that we can be creative, that we can switch things up a little bit, and that we need a little taste of sweetness sometimes when things are hard. So, this is all about leadership. And I want to share the definition of leadership that I like to use, because within that, I find the balance of love and accountability. This is a definition from my mentor, Marshall Gans. It's amended a little bit for this community. He says, leadership is accepting responsibility for enabling others. I say empowering because enabling has a connotation here. Accepting responsibility for empowering others to achieve shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. Accepting responsibility being that I am stepping in. It's not a position, it's not general manager, it's not managing director. It's someone who accepts responsibility for enabling others, engaging others, empowering others. It's not about you. It's about how many other people you can support. To achieve shared purpose. Where are we going together? What are our goals? What is our heart's longing and desire that we want to create in this world? In the face of uncertainty. Uncertainty being the name of the game these days. Leadership these days is not about being certain and having all the answers, but about helping our people thrive through really, really tough conditions in the unknown. And so in this, I find that leadership is about people at its core. And it's about helping people grow, helping people change, helping people thrive through uncertainty. So today we're going to talk about the two key components of helping people grow and change and thrive: love and challenge, or support and challenge, love and accountability. Before we do that, I want to invite you to take a moment and think about, when is a time someone said something to you that helped you grow or change? When's the time someone said something to you that helped you grow or change? And what qualities did that person have in that moment? Take a quiet minute. Let's hear a few of these out. What qualities did that person have? If you're on Zoom, I can see the chat and would love to see your contributions in the chat. And if you're in the room, let's hear out loud some of those qualities. And if we don't get a mic, you can just shout them out and I'll repeat if it's too slow, we'll see.
Lived experience. A lot of people with the experiences of anything we're struggling with in here, most of the time they've gone through it as well, so they have that experience to share.
Yeah, so their experience connected with your experience. There was resonance in that empathy that is there because there's that shared experience. Yeah, Krista?
We had an overwhelming theme of being really validating and gentle and forgiving, but still direct.
Validating, gentle, forgiving, and still direct. Seeing a lot of nods over there. Yeah, Felicia.
So here at this table, the fact that somebody named it, what was going on with us, that they gave it a name and a reason, and then being that light from the other side, kind of showing you where you can be because they walked it ahead of you, and then coming from strength instead of the weaknesses, and how to move forward in those strengths.
Naming the actual challenge as well as the strengths, the possibility, the pathway, potentially. Beautiful, thank you. I'm seeing from Zoom, there was love, they were genuine. Yeah, but they weren't shying away from it either, right? Yeah, this is what you do all the time in your cafes, with your members, with each other. Today, we're just gonna make it a little bit explicit what you're already doing. This sense of being here with somebody in the hardest moment, fully accepting them and fully inviting them to change. So I'm gonna talk about why we need both sides of that full acceptance and the full invitation to shift. How we do it, again, most of us are already doing this. It's just a question of making the implicit explicit and giving a little framing to it. And then we'll talk about what gets in the way of that so often internally. How do we get in our own way when we try to step into a situation where we need to hold somebody in loving accountability? What might be hard for us, and how can we shift that? I find that's the hardest part. So much of the time, one of the most fundamental mistakes we can make in leadership is thinking that love and accountability are opposites. We think of support and challenge like we can only do one at a time, that it's a binary, like an either or, a true false, a yes no. We think that we can be either caring, supportive, loving, understanding, or we can have firm boundaries, hold people accountable, have real accountability and firmness and expectations. Or we can find some kind of balance in a watered down in-between place. So we think of it as a binary. What happens? Let's talk about what's amazing about accountability. At its best, why do we need it? Well, it's firmness, right? It's trust, it's functioning, it's efficiency. When people do what they say they're going to do, when people show up and are held to that showing up, that keeps things going, that keeps movement happening, that keeps our organizations running. And we show up for one another and can depend on each other. Some of us didn't grow up in homes where there was a lot of showing up when people said they would show up. And so it can be very, very powerful for people to have this sense of knowing this is the time boundary And guess what? People are there at the time boundary. That creates trust in the team. And what if that's all we have? What if it looks like this? Oh, that's interesting. It's my picture and the slide. Cool. Thank you. What if it looks like this? Let's imagine you're in a meeting and the whole team's there except for one person. And you want to be having this, accountability. You want to have everybody showing up for each other on time. And you can see that time is limited. You can see that the grant is due tomorrow. You can see that the agenda only has 1 hour and there's 16 things that you have to do. You can see that this person, if they come late, it's going to be on everyone's time. Everyone's going to have to push back. You can see the consequences of that. And so in some organizations, not ours, but in some organizations, that person would come in, and what would they hear? If it was only accountability, only boundaries, they would hear something like, "You're 5 minutes late, don't do that again." Mm-hmm. True. Useful. And what happens if that's all we have in an organization? If we think this is a binary, that's all we have, frustration, burnout. People stop feeling motivated. They stop feeling like they're cared about as human beings, right? We begin to create cultures of fear and stress, apathy, disconnection. It becomes a cutthroat environment that doesn't care about well-being. So we can't only have that one side of the binary. Let's talk about the other side. What does this look like at its best? Support, acceptance, care. It looks like understanding people, where they're at, what's going on in their lives, understanding their intentions, understanding all of the different factors and things that they're balancing. It looks like grace. Again, for people who didn't get a whole lot of that when they were growing up, this can be incredible balm for their spirit. This care for who they are as a person and what's really going on with them. And yet, imagine that meeting. Somebody comes in late, and we say, "Oh, don't worry, it's 20 minutes after the fact, but we'll just adjust the whole agenda. We'll all go late to our kids' childcares. Don't worry, we're here for you. What's going on? In fact, let's take 10 more minutes to just talk about what's going on for you." And oh yeah, let's. We're laughing, but it happens, right? What happens in that case? Not much gets done, right? There can be so much comfort that there's actually no growth or innovation. There can be complacency, inefficiency, kind of stagnation if all we're giving is that sense of like, "Oh, don't worry, we'll just be here." And there can be kind of just underperformance, and there can actually be turnover from that perspective too. So the issue here is that we make the mistake of thinking that this is a binary, and maybe if we're trying to balance it, we can land somewhere in between, somewhere where it's like not all the way on one side, not all the way on the other side. But it's not an either or. Instead, it's what we call, it's not an either or slide. It's what we call a polarity. A polarity, it's not either or, but it's a dynamic interplay of two interrelated, interdependent forces. We need both sides, and the way that they interact with each other is what's important. They interact with each other as part of a larger whole, where we need both and where we can move fluidly between both, where upping one does not mean diminishing the other, but it means we can raise both at the same time. With a polarity, we can weave these two seemingly opposite poles into something that is more than the sum of its parts. So this here, support and challenge, softness and firm accountability, that's a polarity, not a binary. And when we hold it as a polarity, that creates an environment of trust and of care and of showing up for ourselves and others, showing up for the work and for our humanity, of feeling understood and moving forward. When we hold this as a polarity and have both support and challenge, that's where we can address conflicts, where people develop their leadership, where people grow, where people risk take, where there can be innovation. That's, I think, in many of your stories, what created the real growth and change and shift. And I imagine if we asked any of the people that you work with what moments have been the most powerful growth and shift for them, it would have been this balance. That's my guess. So I want to break down specifically, how do we take this polarity and take all these factors on the left, that yielding, softness, that support, understanding, intent, acceptance, and bring them together with all those factors on the right, accountability, firmness, boundaries, expectations, into a whole. So we're going to talk, we've seen why we need both, that they're important. We've seen that shift to holding both at the same time. Now let's talk about how. So consider a situation now where you need a little bit more loving accountability, where you need to hold that support and challenge at the same time. Everyone got one? Could be someone coming late to a meeting. It could be someone not showing up for their membership contribution or for their circles. Maybe somebody is committed to something that they want to do in their own life that you want to be supporting and challenging them to lean into. Let's hear just a few. Just shout them out and I'll repeat them over the mic. Not being late for yourself. Great. So good. So you could work on this for yourself. If there's somebody else, I should have said this, if there's somebody else that you're working with that you want to help hold them with loving accountability, that might be a good example too. But not being late for yourself, or anyone else have other people in their lives who they wish weren't late? Mm-hmm. Great. Mm-hmm. Any other instances of where we need loving accountability that you want to use kind of as an example for today's work? Documentation. I'm saying like, Yes, so getting the documentation done, getting it done on time. Great. Anyone else? Driving without a license. Great. I'm seeing on Zoom someone saying students with anxiety delivering homework late. Thanks, Carlos. Member contributions, making sure that they are showing up for them. Beautiful. All right. So hold those in your minds, whichever yours was. Hold it in your mind, or you can jot it down, because we'll be working with it. And I'll be inviting you in about 10 minutes to actually think of what you might say to that person who is, for example, driving without a license, or who needs to get their documentation done, or to that member who's not showing up all the time for their contribution. So, and that'll be on page 17. We're not there yet, but you can just jot it down if you want. So let's talk about what do you actually say in that moment. The first piece of having this is this thing in the center, and, not but. If you're with, let's say you're on like a first date and somebody says, I really like you, but you know what's coming next and you know you don't believe that first part, right? So one really important part of holding this as a true polarity is cutting out that but in the middle. Care and firmness, rather than care but firmness and accountability. So let's talk about, I broke this down into 3 elements that I see as what we're doing on either side. When we're caring for somebody and when we're offering that support, what does that actually entail? And then 3 elements on the accountability side. And I offer these as reminders almost of what you're already doing, or maybe a reminder of what you could be doing if there's one piece that you're like, I want to do that a little more. So the first piece is we're saying, I see you. I understand your context, your intentions, and what's going on in your life. And if we don't, this is a great place to learn. Second, we're saying, I believe in you. Maybe that's, I know your values, I know your why. Maybe it's saying, I believe in you because I've seen you show up powerfully before. I find that hope is in the past. It's in reminding people of their own agency and of the possibilities, the choices that they've made. And so saying, I believe in you because I've seen you make some really good choices before. And then curiosity, I'm curious about you. And that's what's going on, or what support do you need? Now, this is not how my grandmother did curiosity, which was, I'm curious how an artist like you couldn't see the color scheme in this room. That doesn't count as curiosity. But this is true, genuine curiosity of what's really going on and what support do you need? That's everything we're doing on the support and care side, I think, if we were really to boil it down. And then if we look at the accountability side, if we look at kind of the firmness, the sense of boundaries, what we're really saying is stating the behavior, naming it. So often we shy away from actually naming it with specificity. So it's really helpful to name it and say, as specific as you can. Maybe it's, you drove without a license on Tuesday. Rather than you always. This happened, as specific as you can get. And it has this impact. Again, as specific as you can get. And we're always talking about focusing on the behavior, not the person. And this is a really important time to do that. Then, what's the policy, the rule, or the need of the community that didn't happen? And again, stating that really clearly, and the reasoning behind it, or the consequence, if that's helpful. And then lastly, there we go. And lastly, so now, and you get to make a request, or state the consequence. That is, I think, much of what we're doing on the firmness and boundaries and accountability side. Your behavior has this impact. Here's the rule policy you need, so now. And so this is, at its core, what we're doing when we hold loving accountability. And here's that reminder that we're flowing back and forth between these three on each side and that and in between. That they're not a list that we're running through. We're just weaving them back and forth. So I'm going to invite you to take that situation that you thought of, where you need a little bit more of that balance, and actually think, what might you say? On page 17 of your manuals, there's this big speech bubble right here at the bottom. And it has a side for care and love and understanding, and it has a side for firmness, boundaries, and accountability. And I invite you to actually write out, what might you say to the person in the situation who, for example, needs to get their documentation in, or the member who needs to show up for their contribution. So we'll take about 3 minutes to just brainstorm on your own, and then we'll share. All right. So in just a minute, we're going to share in small groups, and we're going to have time for maybe 1 or 2 people to share their situation and their narrative. And for everybody else to almost imagine yourself in the position of the person who's going to hear that narrative. And how does it feel? Does it feel like there's enough support? Is there enough challenge? Enough care? Enough firmness? And maybe how could they improve just a tiny bit more? Amp up one side or the other or both. I invite, if this was like a little tricky for you and you could actually use some help with this, I invite you to volunteer for your group. Okay? We'll have 5 minutes. So the folks on Zoom will go to breakout rooms now. And everyone in the room, you'll have 5 minutes for 1, maybe 2 people, maybe 3 or 4 if you get there, to share at your tables. Go for it. That was not enough time, but look, a firm boundary. All right. So there's one more important piece. Before we go in to talk to someone and offer this, there's a piece I like to do around reflecting and clearing. First of all, what judgments am I holding about this person or this situation? If there's anything like this person always does this or they're just trying to that, those are usually coming from potentially harmful beliefs that we're totalizing about them. And so it's really, really important to get clear for ourselves, what judgments am I holding about this person or this situation? And second, what biases or defaults, underlying beliefs do I hold about this polarity, about either side of this? And we'll talk about that in a minute. But for some of us, it is really hard to hold the love and the care, and a lot easier to hold the firm accountability side. For others of us, it's the opposite. It's a lot easier to hold the firm, what did I say? The opposite. Anyways. So it can be, we need to get clear on with ourselves about where am I holding back here? And what stories do I have about myself stepping in? We'll do that in just a sec. But then there's a reflecting and clearing on the other end of it. After I talk to them, taking the feedback, is there any feedback from this person that I actually want to consider in how we shape our policies, in how we do our needs and our rules right now, so that we're constantly doing that learning? Because sometimes the policies aren't fair, and when we're trying to hold somebody accountable to it, it's a good learning for us. It's not great learning right there in the moment with them. I find it can be really helpful to say, this is really important, I'm going to think about this, I still need you to, or we need to plan for you to do what you said you'd do, but let's think about if that's the appropriate thing to have people say they'll do. Does that make sense? And so having this reflexive cycle before and after that leadership moment with the individual or group is really, really crucial. Getting clear beforehand and then coming back around at the end and getting clear afterwards. Now, we know often how to reflect and clear. We can think about what judgments are coming up, take that pause, think about, you're all the time thinking about what rules are appropriate, what policies, how things work for the members. So I want to think about what gets in the way of me stepping into one side or the other side of this polarity. Many of us have underlying beliefs about being supportive, soft, gentle, and many of us have underlying beliefs, I would say probably all of us, about having firm boundaries and holding others accountable. And we all receive instructions about how to be on either side of this binary, from our families and from our social location in the world, our race, our class, our gender, all of that. Some of us are told that we must be strong, assertive, we can't be emotional and caring, or we'll be seen as weak. Whereas others of us are told we have to be warm and nurturing, and we can't be assertive, or we'll be too much, too pushy, too aggressive. Right? And so by looking at these messages that we've taken in, looking at our defaults, we can start to see which side of this am I going to have a little more trouble with, and might I, for me, I really struggle sometimes just stating the firm issue, stating the challenge, stating the boundary. And so I hem and I haw and I hedge and I say it with a smile and I try to get like, well, you were a little late, right? And that's because I struggle holding that firm space of you were 5 minutes late to the meeting. And so we're going to take a look at the underlying messages. And by looking at those messages, we can start to notice them and start to see our defaults as leaders and what might be getting in the way. And then I'll offer a few little pieces towards shifting them. But really the first step is just noticing what's there. So if you flip back a page in your book, I swapped the order of these. There's some sentence prompts. And these sentence prompts are an invitation. Don't think about it too much. Just write the first word that comes to mind. If I'm soft, then. If I'm yielding, then. If I offer understanding intent, then. What is the first word that comes to mind with each of those? And then you'll go on to the other side. So we'll take about 5 minutes to brainstorm. There's some blank ones at the bottom if you want to do your own. Just see what comes. 3 questions. As you reflect on what you've written above, what do you notice? What do you notice? Do you default to one side of this polarity? And is there one that's harder for you? Where are your strengths? And what's harder for you? And then what might be the impact of that on your leadership? So we'll have, again, 5 minutes. It's going to be way too short, I promise you. to just reflect together as a table on these 3 questions. Go for it. All right. And are we ready? Okay, good. Great. So I want to hear some insights that came up from that exercise. And I also just want to share briefly in your books and on the slide here, just ways that if anything surprised you there and you were like, I kind of want to shift this one. I want to, like, that doesn't always serve me. There's a couple steps for how do you shift it. And they're in your book on page 17, and I'll just run through them here. First of all, understanding it. Like, why is it there in the first place? Where did that thought come from, and why was it important to actually learn? Getting a really deep understanding of why did I tell myself, for example, if I'm soft, then I'm weak? And where does that come from, and why was it really important to take in that message? Maybe it protected you. And then questioning it and looking back for times, was it always true? Is it always true? And find, I'm sure there is, disproving evidence in your life. And then ask yourself, just what's an edited version of this that I want to carry forward that would serve me a little bit better? So that is a deep, deep process that I've shared in 30 seconds. You can carry it forward with you. But let's just take a moment here to hear any insights that came from either looking at how would you write the narrative in a particular moment using both sides of this polarity, or when you look at your own thoughts and internal kind of hidden beliefs about either side of this, what did you see now? What came up? Yeah, let's use the mic for all of these amazing.
Patriarchy, sexism, misogyny, racism. That's
Yeah.
not my personal experience, but I can imagine if all those things fit, then that's added on there as well for some community members.
100%. Anyone see any patriarchy, misogyny, sexism, racism? Yeah. We learn these, I mean, they're in the broader world, and then they come into us through very specific experiences in our families, in our schools, in the organizations around us. And then we, in order to survive in those systems, carry them forward within ourselves. That's how I see it. So we can actually counter those systems by countering them in our minds and in our spaces. Yes.
Lack of privilege moving through judgment, if that makes
say
sense.
more.
So me using my testimony as encouragement instead of judgment, like my lack of privilege, judging somebody else's situation.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Like creating judgment and seeing, oh wow, that's one I want to check. Yeah. Thank you.
I don't know, I just thought it was interesting how much, like, if I'm soft, then they'll take advantage, or I'll look insecure, and how much it comes back to me, like my perception of myself and how other people affect me was kind of how I react to something is how someone else is going to see me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I bet at one time somebody did see you that way in a way that really wasn't fair to you. And so you maybe took that on. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, we're giving our mic runner some exercise.
I was incarcerated for a very long time. And when I'm doing this, right, so I'm like looking at everything, and pre-incarceration, right, I'm like, if I offer mercy, I'm a pushover, right? If I impose consequences, I'm aggressive. But I was discussing with the table, like, this enlightenment, like I had, like I should, like, to remove, like, the power in removing the word have to with get to, right? Like, I get to connect. Like, I get to prioritize connection. Like, just for me, that was, like, really eye-opening. And helped me change that whole like aspect of it all. So I just wanted
Beautiful.
to share that part.
Thank
Like
you.
getting to we get to today. So
Yeah, we do. Thank you. Any other insights and or questions? I see a couple over here. She's coming.
Hi. I think I wrote down the word rigid a lot of times when I was talking about accountability. And I'm like, oh, wow, I really have a negative thought about that because I'm always like, no, I'm you. Like, oh, you're fine. It's only 30 minutes. Right? You're fine. And then I think sometimes the word loving accountability seems like, is anybody from the South? Like, bless your heart, bless your heart, right? It's like a nice way of saying, not so nice stuff. But, oh, look, I'm on TV. Bless my heart. Anyway, so I think that I maybe have to practice your shifts on how I feel about the word accountability. So that was kind of what I came up with.
Thank
So,
you.
yep.
And also, sometimes it's a good time to be rigid. Like, sometimes being rigid all the time, definitely not helpful. Being rigid sometimes, when it's time, might be a good thing. So maybe there's something around like being rigid is bad that could be shifted there too. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I just like that there's the difference between understanding intent and acknowledging impact. Being in a new leadership role, I've thought about, softness versus firmness, but intent and impact isn't something I've put much thought into. And I think, when situations happen, we want people to understand our intent. And when we look at holding people accountable, a lot of times we're looking at the impact that it makes in our space, right? But we should also consider, acknowledge, and, point out their intent and the goodness in them. So I like that portion of this. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks all. Any questions about this? We have a few minutes for questions, and then we're just going to close out our day.
I have a question.
Great.
What are your thoughts on like the feedback sandwich in relation to this? Because I think my personal opinion is that it dilutes the message you're trying to do here by saying like big compliment the actual feedback and then like compliment just so like I don't feel like a meanie,
Yeah. I think the feedback sandwich gets a little misunderstood sometimes, that we think of it as compliment, harsh feedback, compliment, but I think it is actually support, challenge, support. And if we think about it as trusting connection, that first, it doesn't have to be a compliment, because so often we give, you did this really well, but blah, 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 blah. And so we're just like waiting during that first half of the sandwich for the but, right? So I think of it as, what if we instead, it's a real connection, and maybe it's saying their intent, it's saying your understanding of their intent, maybe it's the I see you or I believe in you. There's something there that is the connection. Then there is there's something there, then there's feedback about what you want them to change, but then there's also kind of what do you want them to keep? What do you want them to continue doing? And that can come at the beginning or the end. But so it's again, I think it's aiming for that balance of support and challenge and that weaving in between back and forth. Yeah, thanks for that. Who else has a question? I know you do. And I can take questions out of the Zoom chat too.
I don't really have a question. I've just been sitting here thinking about it, something we're sharing here. Like, when I'm going through this weaving, right, and I'm looking at the caring and I'm thinking about accountability and just doing the work, I'm sitting there realizing, like, I'm basing a lot of it off of me. And when I'm basing it off of me and what I feel like or how I feel someone should respond to me or how I would like someone to talk to me, I'm not actually hearing the person.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, in those conversations, being inviting and me sitting there just getting out of myself and getting out of what I was taught and actually hearing the person, a lot of it, they end up being aware of themselves. And for me, if the accountability piece is not me telling you what to do, It's the fact that you're aware. Okay, so now how can I support you, and what do you think we should move forward with? Like that's just how I take it.
Yeah, beautiful. No, thank you for bringing that in. That sometimes the understanding the impact and the behavior and the rule doesn't have to come from you. It could come from them. It could be kind of like in conversation. It's just that like having those elements as part of the conversation. And you're right, the deep listening and that deep connection of like, I might not know everything that's going on with this person and I want to understand. Yeah. Does that sum it up? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Beautiful. So I'm seeing in the chat, can we model how to say it in the example where the person was late to the meeting? So what might we say instead of you're late or hey, a very quick model might just be, I know there is so much going on in your life right now and that your car broke down yesterday and we have this donor that we're really trying to get this through, so we need you to be on time as much as possible this week, and if that can't happen, we need to have a conversation about it. Something like that. Again, I struggle with the boundaries, so. But yeah, something along the lines of that. And then there's always time to have conversation. I mean, there's never time, but you can have a conversation afterwards, of course, if you need to. So let's pause here. Oh, I have my thank you slide. Hang on. Check it out. Oh yeah, I wanted to close with this Martin Luther King quote. Power without love is reckless and abusive, but love without power is sentimental and anemic, he says. Power without love is reckless and abusive, but love without power is sentimental and abusive and anemic. In other words, power without love can never be just, but love without power can never achieve justice. So thank you all for bringing your love and your power to create so much justice in the world. Thank you. So, thank you. We have 7 more minutes until 4 o'clock, and I've been drawing all day, so I want to put up these drawings and do a quick little reflection on highlights of today for you. So we're going to switch the slide deck. We started this morning, Leading with Love, what feels like a million years ago, with an incredible keynote or opening session from Killian, where she said, when we live like we belong to each other, we change communities. Do I live more from love or from fear? Healing is an act of communion. She shared 3 points: that love longs to give itself away, not just through us, but as us, and that forgiveness at deep levels is key if we long to be free. And she said, thank you for living with love. And then, we heard about loving stewardship and how responsible stewardship is how we practice loving accountability with all of our different stakeholders, and how strategic plans and stewardship can be an act of love. We heard, what is your proudest moment that the love keeps people coming, the change? And then we heard about incredible coalition building for recovery advocacy, that when you get people in the room, the fish sandwiches come. So we've got our summaries of trusting, strategic plans, that's an act of love, and that if we become organized, what can we do? Here we have connecting to your why and support and challenge as loving accountability. So from this whole journey that we've taken today, what are some of your highlight moments that make you proud to be a part of this community? Let's just hear a few of those right before we close. Moments that make you proud to be a part of this community. What about it? Let's get a mic. Hang on one sec. You're going to have to say that all one more time, but we'll clap for you now. Say that one more time.
I don't remember what I said. No. Yeah, this moment right here where everybody's in the room with the same heart and we all lead with these guiding principles, this is the most amazing moment for me today. Thank you.
Beautiful. Jade.
All the love. I've never worked for a company or been at a recovery center that used that word once, let alone every day, all day. So I love the love.
Over here. Oh, 1, 2.
It's the member that walks through the door and says, "Honey, I'm home."
Oh.
It's the honesty and transparency for me. You know, life is a journey that we're all on. And so with us, first of all, being aware of that and being aware of yourself, but finding that love. I know we toss the word love around all day. And you know what? It's a beautiful thing when you look in that mirror and you can love yourself after years of, because we've all been through some things, right? We all can agree we've been through some trauma in our lives. But when you find love and when you find that love right in the mirror, like Michael Jackson said, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. Start right there with the man in the mirror. And so today has been powerful. It's been just an array of love, and we got to keep this, we'll hold this and spread this love out into our communities every day.
So beautiful that you are those mirrors. Thank you. And thank you for finding yourself in that mirror, each of you, and for being those mirrors to each other in this room all day today and to the members that you work with. So that will be our closing for today. We'll see you later at the dinner event, and we'll see you tomorrow for another amazing day.